कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः।
Religion is based on our faith in some concept of God. Based on that concept, we do certain practices like worshipping, following some rituals, following some other vratas and other practices, or yaga, yajna, etc. But if we are thinking, if we are deep in our thinking, then at one time we start inquiring that for such a long time I have been worshipping God, but is God really there? Or if at all He is there, what is He like? All these years I have been worshipping, I have not known anything more about God. Whatever faith I had, depending on that faith, I have been practicing. But I don't know whether I have come closer to God or whether God has come closer to me. Also, we may even question that whether such a God exists or not. If at all He exists, whether He can be known by a human being. If He can be known, then what is the way we can know, and how is that knowledge? What will a human being become when he realizes God, if at all He can be realized? When this question starts pestering us, then only we start entering into the spiritual domain. We become a spiritual seeker. Initially, we may read the various scriptures or other writings of the God-realized persons, what they have written about their realization, and our inquiry builds up with that. We go deeper and deeper, and perhaps finally one day we think that we have to know directly from a God-realized person what is this realization, what will happen to a human being when he realizes God. This is what happened in Bhagavad Gita also. After Sri Krishna talked to Arjuna about the Sankhya Yoga, that is about the truth, immediately Arjuna asked Krishna that Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisthasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kim asita brajeta kim. There he wanted to know about what will happen to a person who realizes the truth. This question particularly has two aspects in it. In the first line he asked, when a person is in samadhi, which is supposed to be a state of union with God as we talk about it, or the state of union with the self, when we get dissolved into the selfhood or selfness, that at that time the person is not moving, he is not interacting with the outer world. So he is asking, what is the definition of this samadhistha sthita prajna? The sthita prajna who is in samadhi, how do you define him? That is one aspect of it. And in the second aspect, sthitadhihi kim prabhasheta kim asita brajeta kim. That how does a sthitadhi who has come out of the samadhi, how will he sit, how will he move around, how will he speak? That is figuratively he is speaking about. That how will such a person interact with the world? So one is a non-interactive state when the seeker or the knower is in the self state and not in an interactive state. The other is when he comes back from samadhi and he is interacting with the world. What is the difference in his interaction? How is his mind behaving? How is his intelligence behaving? That was his question. Because finally, although we are wanting to have the knowledge, the finally of interest is what happens to us when we become a knower, when the knowledge is had, what will happen to us? This is how the spiritual inquiry goes. That is, from a faith in a concept of God to the finding out the truth, whether God is there, and if at all He is there, what is His nature, how a human being can realize God, and what happens to him when he realizes God. Now I would like you to think a little more and go back to the very genesis of the concept of God. Can you think, why did man first start thinking about God at all? You know, it is from causality, that right from birth we think everything in creation is guided by causality, that if you push the table it will move, if you don't push it will not move. If you drop the book from your hand it falls to the ground, if you hold it, it doesn't fall. If you eat, when you are hungry, if you eat, the hunger gets subsided. If you don't eat, it doesn't get subsided. You can think of any aspect of our life, everywhere there is a causality seen. In the material world, everywhere we find everything is moving according to causality. And whatever precedes in time, we call it cause, and whatever follows in time, we call it effect. So naturally, in the ancient time, when they found that suddenly from somewhere flood came, or a storm came, or an earthquake occurred, they were not knowing where from it is happening. They did not have the knowledge of everything that is behind this. Even now we don't have fully. So naturally they started thinking that because everything needs a power behind to change, any change needs a power behind to act. So there must be a power behind this flood or rain or storm or earthquake. So corresponding to each natural power they had conceived of a god, like the god behind the water is Varuna, god behind electricity, lightning is Indra, the god behind wind is Maruta, or so many other things. The Vedic gods are all, basically they were all natural powers. That is, various natural powers, whatever we see, the play of power happening in nature, where we cannot easily identify any cause, they conceived of gods behind them. Now as it advanced, finally that God, concept of God, became a cosmic God, that at least behind this creation also there must be cause. Why should we think that there should be a cause behind this creation? Because in creation everything is caused. Whatever we find, nothing happens without a cause. So this universe also must have been caused by something. That was the idea with which they thought of some causal God. That is how the concept of God came to human mind. But our rishis in those ancient prehistoric time, they started thinking about it, that what is there any ultimate cause behind the universe, and how can we trace it? Their thoughts, their rational thoughts went to such lofty heights, we will find it very difficult to grasp even. I would try to follow to some extent the thought which led to the discovery of the soul or the self or the Brahman as the ultimate reality of the universe. Mind you, initially it might not have been a discovery through analysis. The first discovery, I believe that it must have been an experimental discovery. They somehow struck at the samadhi where they understood their real identity, and then only the logical foundation of it, which led to the concept of the Brahman and self, which are the same, one and the same, that came to be. Suppose we find some cause of A, which we finally try to discover, and we find out B to be the cause of A. So naturally the question will be then, how did B came to be? What is the cause of B? So we find out, we inquire further, and we finally arrive at C as the cause of B. Like that, as we proceed, We may go to any extent and arrive at, say, Z, which is the cause of Y. But again the question will be there that where from did Z come? By following this causality, this rational analysis of causality, you can easily understand that there is no end to it, there is no final reply to it. That is, whatever we finally find as the cause of the universe, we will ask that where from did that come? Even suppose if we say that the God was the cause of the universe, then we will ask where from did God come? That question we cannot easily eliminate. As long as we are thinking of God as something different from me, the consciousness existing somewhere in the sky or wherever it is, or any other force which can be observed or known, that is also part of the material universe. So this unending nature of the causal analysis, in our Shastras it is called anavastha dosha, because it never gives you a stable ground wherefrom you can analyze the truth and the ultimate cause of the universe. In English it is called infinite regression. That is, this causality is never going to end. Now our people, our rishis, they understood that if there is any ultimate cause, if we call it cause, but it is truly speaking not a cause but the substratum or the reality, if there is any ultimate reality, it has to be beyond causality, because causality by its very definition is within the ken of duality. It is of a cyclical nature. Causality also presupposes time, that whatever is the cause is preceding in time, whatever is following in time is the effect. So space, time, causality, they are all interdependent, they are all within the ken of duality. You cannot reach to any ultimate truth through such analysis that they understood. And they finally arrived at a great discovery, which I would like to call it the greatest ever discovery of human civilization. It is much more important and final than all other scientific discoveries of the world. But we don't think about it, we don't pay heed to it, we don't give it its due honor also. They found that in scientific analysis, in objective analysis, we are analyzing the objective world, completely eliminating the observer who is analyzing the world, who is looking at the world. Truly speaking, everything in this material world is appearing in my consciousness, only then I come to know of it. Whatever we are seeing, the people, the building, the nature, the plants, everything, truly speaking, they are all appearing in my consciousness. They are all a formation in the consciousness. They are actually, we can say, written in the consciousness. Suppose we write in air, we write an elephant and we write a table. They are not different. Both are made of air only, that is air alone. Similarly, whether it is my enemy or my friend or my husband or wife or my guru or my shishya or a building, whatever it is, everything is only written in our consciousness. We are knowing the whole universe as it is appearing in our consciousness. The whole universe, which consists of my body, mind, personality also. My own body, mind, personality is also, we are coming to know only when it is appearing in the consciousness. So when we think of this entire universe which consists of my body, mind, personality appearing in the consciousness, then can we say that the consciousness is any more limited by the body, mind, personality? Is not the whole universe which consists of my body, mind, personality as a small speck is only appearing in the consciousness? So there, that consciousness, the I, the real I, our real identity, it transcends all limitations of the body-mind personality. We arrive at that transcendental I, which for easy understanding we may say universal I, the universal consciousness, the universal self, or the Brahman, on which the whole universe appears to be. So the whole material reality, the material world, the material universe is appearing in that consciousness. So it is the substratum of the entire material universe. By causal analysis, we cannot reach it, but causal analysis itself points to us that you have to be on causality to arrive at the ultimate truth. And what is there apart from the material universe, apart from whatever objective universe we are seeing? It is the subject in us. When we really try to locate that subject, what they did, they started looking into the subject, and when they discovered that real subject, then the whole objective universe got dissolved in that subject, and they discovered this one singular transcendental subject, I in us, which we are always referring to I, not knowing its real dimension. We think that this I is limited by the body-mind personality, but body-mind personality is only a speck in the whole universe which is appearing in that I. That is how they arrived at the real identity of ourselves, the I, the consciousness. Our rishis wanted to find out that who is that I who is looking at the world, interacting with the world, observing the world. They started their analysis that we refer to this body as, when I am sick, I say I am sick. And sometimes I say that my body is sick today, my body is not all right. That means sometimes I am using the body as something I possess, and sometimes I am saying I am the body, I am associating myself with the body. So there is definitely a confusion in our expression. The true point of view will be that I am observing the body, which is always changing. The body was very small in early childhood, it has grown, and every day, even not every day, every moment it is changing. It is moving, it is changing, the cells are changing, that we are not seeing, of course, but whatever we are saying or seeing also, it is changing every moment. So I am the observer of all those changes. Now, to understand any change, there must be a reference which does not change. Because I have not changed, I am able to observe the changes of the body. Suppose the clock, we are able to know the time only because the dial is not moving with the arms. Suppose the arms, along with the arms, the dial also starts moving, then we will not know time from the clock. Any change is perceived always with respect to a non-changing background. Here this I observer is observing all the changes of the body. So I is the subject, is the observer, is the revealer of the body, and body is the revealed object which the I is knowing, I is perceiving, I is watching, I is knowing. Similarly, if we go further into the mind, suppose the mind, we often say I am very sorry today, I am sad today. Sometimes we say that my mind is not all right today. Again the same confusion in our expression. Truly speaking, the changes of the mind I am observing. So I am not changing along with the mind. The mind is undergoing the change. The mind is happy now, will not be happy later on. It will be sad sometimes, depressed sometimes ecstatic, sometimes sorry. So all these changes, now good thought has come, now bad thought has come. That is, whatever is happening in the mind, good emotions have come, bad emotions have come. All these I am observing. So all these changes in the emotional aspect of our personality, the mental aspect of personality, I am observing. If we go further inside into the intelligence level, then also we find that I am observing the intelligence. Now it is working very sharp, or now it is dull. A few minutes ago it was quite sharp, or a few years ago the intelligence could analyze very well. I could understand the abstract things. Now I am not able to understand. These are the changes of the intelligence that also I am observing. So even the intelligence is an object before me. That I consciousness in me, the soul which we call, that is only witnessing all these changes. So the constant factor, the constant identity ever remains without any change, going on revealing the changes taking place in the external world as well as the internal world of mind, intelligence, emotion, everything. Now then, what is this subject, the I, we are talking about, which is the observer? They started to look farther within, sitting in meditation, sitting in contemplation. They tried to find out, then who am I? Who am I? What is that, my real subject? Where is that self or the soul which I am always referring to as I? Now there is a problem in this. In any seeker practicing to realize the self will have this difficulty, because from birth, not even birth, it is in the cells, it has gone into the cells from several generations. We have been only thinking of the outgoing things. We are only looking at the external world. Our mind is always outgoing, observing the world, understanding the world. So when we try to find out ourself, our real identity, then also we try to locate that identity as something different from me. That I want to discover the self. By discovery, we only know to discover what is different from me. But here is something which I have to discover myself. So it is not different from me. But our very nature of our sadhana, our pursuit, will make us always try to discover something, where to discover something means something as appearing as an objective knowledge before us, as an object before our understanding or knowledge. This is a very subtle point and perhaps an advanced concept, but I introduced right in the beginning. I think it is understandable if we go into it rationally. Now the problem is that as long as we try to discover the self like this, we will not succeed. The effort itself will be self-defeating. Because the moment we want to find out, discover ourself as something different from me, it is not the self. So truly speaking, we are making the self different from the self, or in other words, we are objectivizing the subject. By our very effort to detect it, to discover it, we are objectivizing the subject. So finally, they surrendered their effort, they became effortless. And when they are not trying to know anything at all, that effortfulness has gone, the self reveals itself. That is why the surrender is given the highest position here also. That when we surrender all our efforts, then the self reveals itself. There is no world, no body-mind personality. The self which is revealing the external world, which is revealing the body-mind personality, that reveals itself. Truly speaking, always whatever we are perceiving, our consciousness is getting engaged to that. Suppose I am looking at the book. So this book is being revealed. Actually the revelation takes place by the consciousness, but our focus is on the book. So we miss the consciousness. The consciousness doesn't appear to our understanding. So the book is in focus and the consciousness is missed. This is about the external objects. Similarly, for the internal objects also, when some thought is revealed, there is a thought of my mother, thought of my father, thought of the office, thought of the factory, good thought, bad thought. There the consciousness is revealing the thought and the focus is on the thought. So the consciousness is missed again. The consciousness which is universal, which is without any limitation, without any form, whenever it is revealing anything formed, anything limited, anything objective, our focus is always on that limited revelation, not on the revealer. So there we miss the revealer. When we don't try to see anything in the world, the mind, the sense organs remain silent, the mind remains silent, the intelligence remains effortless, then the self reveals itself. In Kathopanishad it is said, Yada panchavatishtante jnanani manasa saha buddhischana vicheshtate tamahu paramam gatim. This is the state Kathopanishad is speaking about. Now this is an experimental record. It is the record of the experiment performed by our rishis.